Hi everybody, Joey here again and welcome back. So today I'm going to show you how to build one of the best aquarium filters that you can have for your aquarium. The sponge filter. Now the sponge filter has been in the hobby for a very long time, but for good reason. It's cheap, it's effective, and it's simple to use. While not everybody wants to run them as their primary source of filtration, just due to technology these days, sponge filters still have their uses in the hobby. Now, I personally always have a sponge filter running somewhere, whether it's in an aquarium, in a sump, somewhere within my water, I have a sponge filter running. That way, I always have a cycled filter. Just in case I get a new fish, I can set up a quarantine tank, or if a fish is sick or injured, I then can set up a hospital tank, or if my fish decide to spawn and have fry or babies, then I can actually set up a nursery tank as well. Having a sponge filter running at all times means I'm ready for anything, anytime. Even a power outage. If my power goes out, I can simply plug in my sponge filter into a battery-powered air pump, and my fish will be okay. Of course, I'm definitely going to want to make sure that I'm following the tips that I outlined in the video on how to survive a power outage as well. A sponge filter's simplicity makes them very appealing. Given the large surface area that a typical sponge filter offers, it not only makes them a great biological filter, but a mechanical filter as well. Now I'm going to show you how I make my sponge filters, and I make them for any size aquarium. I'm also going to show you how to keep multiple sponge filters cycled at any given point without taking up any extra room. So, let's get started. The first thing you're going to need is obviously a sponge. Now, sponges come in multiple porosities, and what that means is how many pores it has within the actual sponge. They're rated on a scale of PPI, which is pores per inch. The ideal pores per inch that you'd be looking for is about 10 to 30. Luckily, sponges are plentiful in this hobby. Whether you get them at the pet store or online, they're basically sold at any aquatic store. You can also use pre-existing sponges that are meant to be used in other filters, namely the AquaClear hang on the back filter. Those sponges that they come with or that you can buy in addition are great for a sponge filter. Next up, some PVC pipe. I like to use 3/4 inch PVC pipe because it allows me to slide in a air stone and have it freely move around if I needed to. It's also not too big to be obstructive and take up too much space within the sponge. You're also going to need an air pump, obviously, some airline tubing, and a basic air stone, nothing too fancy. As well as the PVC, you're going to need a couple of PVC adapters. One is an end cap. Basically, this just goes on the end and caps off a PVC. You'll also need a 90-degree elbow. You can also use a 45-degree elbow. This is a must, and I'll show you why later. You'll need to get them the same size as the PVC that you're using. So in my case, these are 3/4 inch adapters. You're also going to need some silicone. As always, I use GE Silicone 1 window and door. Lastly, you're going to need a ceramic tile. Ideally, you'll pick one that is the same color as your substrate so as it blends in a little bit easier when it's in your aquarium. Also, picking a size that is the same size of your sponge is ideal as well. That way you don't have an overbearingly big ceramic tile and only a tiny sponge. It just aesthetically looks better. So that's it for supplies. Now let's get started with the build. We're first going to build it, and then I'm going to show you how it works and why it works. So first of all, you want to start off with your actual sponge. Now you have a few options here. I actually have a hot knife, so I'm able to drill in a little hole in the actual sponge and I get a really nice size. It's slightly smaller than the actual PVC, so when the PVC goes in there, it stays on there really snugly, but not obstructive. If you don't have a hot knife, which most people don't, feel free to use some scissors or a knife to stab it in multiple directions until the PVC is able to actually slide in easily. With the sponge now prepared, we can move on to the next step. That's where your ceramic tile comes in place. Before you even start using it, it's good to wash it and probably soak it in warm water to get any debris and any coatings that are left on it. Sometimes there's a powder coating on the bottom. The purpose of the ceramic tile is very simple. It gives it the actual sponge filter, something to hold on to, and it weighs it down and holds it right in place. So you're going to take your bottom cap and you're going to silicone it directly to the ceramic tile. If you don't have access to ceramic tiles, you could use a piece of glass, ideally about 6 millimeter, to sand the edges so it's not sharp. Once the end cap is siliconed in place, you'll have to wait about 24 hours for that to cure before you can move on to the next step. Although you can get quite a bit done and pretty much complete the sponge filter before waiting for it to cure. You just can't put it in the aquarium yet. So the next thing you're going to want to do is take your PVC pipe and drill multiple holes in it. I like to drill 1/4 inch holes within my PVC. And to realize where you're going to need to drill those holes is very simple. Place it onto the end cap, take a pen and mark off where the end cap and the PVC pipe meet. Put the sponge on it, and around the top of the sponge, mark where the sponge is. So now when you take the PVC off, you now have 2 marks where that sponge will be, and that's where you're going to drill your holes. You want to drill them about 1/4 inch from the lines in. This way when the water's sucking through, it's only sucking water through the sponge and not below or above it. With your 90-degree elbow or 45-degree elbow, you drill a hole in the exact top of it. The reason being is because we're going to pass the air line through it. So that hole needs to be slightly smaller than the actual airline tubing. That way, the airline tubing is held snugly in place and it allows it to be held firmly so the air stone doesn't move up and down. Now we can put it all together. We'll first start off with the 90-degree elbow and putting the airline through it. So that's held in there nice and snugly. The air stone then inserts into the actual PVC pipe. And you want this air stone right to the bottom of the actual PVC pipe so it's flush with the bottom. From there, put your sponge filter on, or the actual sponge. Then insert it onto the base. So that's it. Now you plug it in. So some of the key features here are very simple. We have a sponge as large as we want it to be. We have a weighted base, and that cap that we put on the bottom elevates the sponge up. We're just pushing the sponge down to the top of that cap and it sits snugly. It can't move up or down anymore. That's going to allow complete circulation all around the sponge filter. The 90-degree elbow serves 2 purposes. 1, to hold the airline in place right at the bottom. 2, it's also going to offer the availability of directing where that water flow is going to go in your aquarium. You can even put an extension on the actual elbow to push it further away from the actual sponge filter. So the way a sponge filter works is simple. That airline tube is going to have air pumping through it. As that air rises through the PVC pipe, it's creating suction behind those air bubbles. All of those holes that we drilled in the PVC are going to draw water in through them. But that water first has to pass through this sponge. So what's happening there is as bacteria or beneficial bacteria cultivates the sponge and that water passes over it, the nitrogen cycle will occur. As the water exits, it's fully filtered water that has been mechanically and biologically filtered. Now, how are we going to keep multiple sponge filters cycled? And how do we rate them? Well, for a block of sponge that is approximately 4 by 4 by 2, that should be good for aquariums up to about 30 gallons. So if you stack sponges on top of each other, one after the other, you can get quite a decent sized sponge filter, rated up to 90 gallons or even more, depending on the size of your sponge as well as the air pump. Now, to cycle a lot of them at once and to keep them cycled within your aquarium, everything works the same, except you're going to have a longer pipe with holes drilled in it, of course. You're also going to have even more sponge filters. So it goes together very simply. It goes identically as to the way the smaller one did, except we're just going to keep stacking them on top of each other, just like that. Then your air pump goes right in. You want your air stone all the way to the bottom. And again, you can add an extension on there so that the filtered water goes further away from the actual sponge. So now when you need a filter, you keep your smaller standpipe available, and that should already be silicone to another piece of tile. All you'd be missing is the actual sponge, so you'd have another 90-degree elbow as well, and maybe even an air pump. And all you would do is simply take off one of the sponges, leaving the remaining ones in your aquarium, and then you have another cycled sponge filter at any given point. So that's it, folks. That's how I make my sponge filters. Now, you're probably wondering about overall costs. Anywhere between $4 to $5 is what you should expect for this build. Anyways, guys, that was it. I hope you enjoyed the video. I definitely want to thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.